Cool. So we're going to start with sharing the answer to that question, like one example of something nice you're doing. I see a lot of people started sharing already, but please do keep it on coming if you have some more ideas. That's perfect. Let's kick it off with a little bit. I'm Mirna. For those who don't know, I think most of you knows me, but we have a couple of new names or faces. So welcome, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Mirna. I won't tell you much about me today because it's such a short time, but I do a lot of positive psychology and trainings in positive psychology. That's really my passion. And yeah, if you find this today interesting, do stay somewhere around Happiness Academy, and you'll hear much more about what we are doing and so on. So today we are talking about self-compassion, and that means we're going to talk about following topics. Well, first of all, that means it was again difficult decision for me what to choose to squeeze into 1 hour, because all of the topics we're covering are very big and interesting topics. But then I settled for a bit of combination, so I hope you're going to find it useful. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what do we mean when we say we want to be our own best friend, or we want to treat ourselves as an own best friend. What does that mean? What does that somehow include from different topics, from different aspects? We can actually take that in quite diverse ways, and we're going to explore just a little bit what are all the different ways we can understand that statement, but also work on that statement a little bit more. Then we're going to be a little bit nerdy on the side of positive psychology, but just a little bit, talking about self-compassion and just a little bit about what it is and how can we define it, and just to say a little bit on that, a bit more narrow part of being our own best friend, so the one we call self-compassion. And then we're going to have a bit of fun with talking about how can we practice it, how can we actually develop more of both of these things, being our own best friend and having more self-compassion, relating to ourselves more kindly, more gently, more friendly. So we're going to basically, at this part, we're going to go through many aspects of it. What are all the different, high-level approaches of working with that for ourselves and of developing more of that. But then in the end, we're going to also go a little bit to the practical side. We're going to do 1 or 2, I hope 2, short exercises together, and then I'll also share with you in the end a bunch of other exercises you could be trying out or doing if you want to explore the topic further. So the idea is really to cover a bit of this brainstormy high-level side and give some ideas how can we approach it in terms of strategy and way of thinking about self-compassion, and then also touch on this practical, very tool-oriented side. Hey, you can try out this or do this, or kind of more cover it from that side. Well, neither of them will be very extensive because we're here just for an hour, but I hope both of them will give you some new ideas, and some interesting approaches. Before we start with the topic itself, I also wanted to share a little bit with you about where does this webinar and this topic fit. And I like to do this on these webinars because within Happiness Academy, we are trying to kind of build up things in a way that it's a bit more related to community that actually talks and support each other in development of their positive psychology knowledge and different skills for kind of more nicer life, more successful or more happier life. And we really want to keep it in a way that we connect different things, that we don't kind of just drag you into one hour webinar, but also keep you engaged in a conversation with other people from that tribe and so on. So to do that, I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective. What are the other things we're doing and how we do it, and where does this specific topic fit and in which way? Because that could also discover different topics for you that could be interesting to explore. So within Happiness Academy, what we're trying to do is to kind of inspire, empower, and educate more than anything. That's in the core of the mission. Individuals on having a little bit happier life. So bringing in more fulfillment, joy, just more like feeling good about things we do. And we do that primarily through workshops. So workshops, webinars, different events, different educational happenings, let's say, but also a bit through designing different materials and a bit through, let's say, facilitating conversation in different communities related to positive psychology. In terms of events, we approach it from 3 different perspectives. What's really in the core is workshops, and workshops are more quite small groups, very interactive, very experiential learning, where we mix and match theory, exercises, discussions, a lot of sharing and reflection, and which are really kind of in-depth learning experience built to kind of push you to really practice some of these things. But then to not keep it so exclusive and to not keep it so limited to small number of people, we also do a lot of webinars and talks, which are really focused on just kind of like throwing the knowledge out there. And that's what's going to be happening today. So just like sharing a lot of different ideas, sharing a lot of different tools, and then leaving it up to you. Are you going to actually pick it up and do something with it? Like, it's none of my business after this webinar, although I'm happy to support you if you're going to need more ideas on something. But we kind of leave it with you. We don't guide you so much through the experience. We also love doing meetups. We are doing them right now in Zagreb, in Amsterdam, and also in virtual space in our Facebook community called Positive Psychology Tribe. And the idea of meetups is really a conversation, that any of the topics that we all learn about, that we also exchange ideas, kind of like what you've been exchanging now in chat, like any sort of idea exchange, conversation, mutual support. I know some of you are eye-rolling now because you know all of this already, so I'm going to move on. I still want to kind of give a bit of a context for new people. Everything we do within Happiness Academy in terms of content runs around positive psychology, so science of happiness in a way, and it runs around the framework we designed that's called 12 Pillars of Happiness. And what we are doing this year is focusing each month on one of the pillars and just trying to share things on newsletter, align workshops with it, share things in the tribe, in Facebook in general, to that pillar of that month. And this month, well, actually previous month, in April, our focus was really being on best friends. So if this is a topic that you find interesting and you want to explore more, there are also some things on Happiness Academy blog and on the Facebook and a lot of ideas running around. And today with this webinar, we're going to close off that topic for this month. And then we're going to move towards the mindset, which is our topic of the next month. So I just wanted to share this with you also as a framework to explore as a topic. If you want to learn more about positive psychology and explore what's there, 12 Pillars are a really nice place to start. And you can find them on the Happiness Academy website or wherever. And last thing before we dive in is that I would want to give a little bit of disclaimer, because we prefer to build more interactive, more experiential learning events. I want to say this today is definitely not something that's a full training on self-compassion. It's not something that you can consider like a proper educational experience. It's really like throwing a bunch of tools and ideas at you and give you the ownership of them to play with them and explore them further. Enough of intro, enough of like, where does this fit? And let's go straight into the interesting stuff. So when we say pillar 4 of happiness is being own best friend, that's the way we call it at Happiness Academy, all the topics related to self-compassion, because to be very frank, when we say self-compassion or self-love, then a lot of people freaks out. So usually they need a bit of more gentle intro to it. And then we kind of go like, okay, and it's also about how you relate to yourself. Happiness depends on that as well. And how much of your own best friend can you be? And we defined that, or we described that pillar, saying basically that means striving to be your best self in a gently compassionate, friendly, and loving way. So what that means, we still want to keep that element of us wanting to fulfill our potential, of us striving to be better than we are. So self-compassion is not about being lazy on the couch and cozy with, with nice, just spoiling yourself. It's also about striving to be your best, fulfilling your potential, living your purpose, being authentic. However, it's also about that side of doing all that while being very gentle, very compassionate, very friendly, very loving towards yourself. So I'm going to keep on going on this space with quite a lot of other ideas, but you're very welcome to jump in if you want to ask something, or if I'm speeding too fast, or if something is not clear in chat, or just speak up and tell me. That's just because I won't be opening a lot of space for conversation and saying, oh yeah, what do you want to share? So please do still, regardless of that, feel free to chime in if you feel like. We do have a bit of time. I didn't pack it as much as I usually tend to. So yeah, you're welcome to jump in. So the question then really goes, what does that mean to be own best friend? What are all the other different topics and ideas and the ways we can look at it. What are the aspects of being our own best friend? Well, one you know already. One is really self-compassion. So that's about, we're going to dive into that one a little bit deeper today, because before it became such a popular topic within positive psychology, it was not one topic that was on the radar for a very long time. You know, something like self-esteem was much more regarded topic than self-compassion. So it's very, and that one is one that is really in the core of saying being our own best friend, just this relating to ourselves compassionately and kindly as an idea. But then it's also self-care. And that's just taking care of whatever it is that we need at some given moment. I think what you were sharing in chat, like also seeing the photos of puppies and all these, a lot of different coffees, ice creams and crafts and dance, music, movies and all that. I think that would quite go on the side of self-care. Just kind of like feeling that we need some way of showing ourselves a little bit of some, like in behavior, some care, some way of being nice to ourselves. That's the second aspect you can look. Then there is an aspect of self-love, very powerful one, very important one, very interesting one, because it's one of the ones that is really difficult for people in our kind of, let's say, Western modern world, let's put it that way. Self-love is really becoming one of the issues, not feeling like we deserve love, not feeling like we deserve being whatever good things to happen to us, and just not being gentle enough towards ourselves. And it's crazy that is happening. It really does not make sense when you think about it, but in reality, it's something that's very present. So today we're not going to go so much in the topic of self-love, which is kind of a layer up from self-compassion, a little bit more difficult, but also more powerful in a way. However, I will give you some ideas in the end where you can find more about this topic as well. There's really, really cool book on that, and then some exercises I can share later. But I would definitely suggest, if you're just starting to explore this topic, to start with self-compassion. It's an easier road and a little bit broader and softer way of doing it. Then we also have self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is about accepting ourselves as we are, and just, again, relating to ourselves kindly and not pushing ourselves to change, not judging ourselves too harshly about things we don't maybe like about us. So that one is also, it's quite related to the side of mindfulness and meditation as well, and just the mindset of meditation. It's also a really important topic. We can say that it makes one part of self-compassion in a way, but it's also not one that we're going to so much explore today. But now with this and the next slide, I just want to share with you all of these different aspects we can look at relating to ourselves from, and all the different aspects that could be interesting to explore further apart from self-compassion before we get to the more practical side. And then it's also forgiveness, like forgiving others and forgiving ourselves for anything we are angry at ourselves or are judging ourselves for, is very, very strong component of relating to ourselves well as well. Because as long as we are angry or upset about someone else, or overly judgmental or anything else towards someone else or towards ourselves, it's not very likely we'll be able to feel good in our skin. So this is a little bit the sidetrack comparing to the other things I mentioned, but it's very, very relevant one as well. And it's very interesting when you talk to people, which of these two things, forgiveness to others versus self-forgiveness, is more difficult one, and why, and how do they do it? It's, again, very, very interesting topic to explore as well. And then I purposely added 3 dots just to say there is much more under this umbrella. I just don't want to talk about this part for the whole hour. So these pillars that I mentioned are kind of the one that we work on most, at least within Happiness Academy, as part of building relationships with ourselves. But there is definitely more under this hood. So there is definitely more you could be exploring, related also to own identity, to exploring own strengths, to recognizing more own strengths, to self-confidence and self-esteem, which are quite a complicated one as well. So definitely much more you could be exploring. So before I launch a few more aspects of being our own best friend at you, and a few more elements we can explore and work at, I want to invite you to reflect for a moment and just think a little bit which of these that we mentioned, so between self-compassion, self-acceptance, self-love, self-care, which are the ones you would want to strengthen and develop for yourself? And I would invite you to start from which is the one that would have the biggest impact if you did on your happiness, on yourself. So it's really, if you want, you can share the question in, the reflection in chat as well, but I won't ask you to do it. So it's really reflection for yourself, but if you want to share, that's cool, because then other people might get some ideas as well. So I love the question in chat from Jasmine. I hope I'm not using the name. I will ask you, can we please discuss it in the end? Because we will it will take us somewhere else right now, comparing to the next direction. So I'm very happy to discuss that question, but could we come back to it towards the end of the call? If I don't remember, please remind me. I think I will remember, but you never know. So cool. I love the question though. So how do you cope with the situation when your whole environment is about self-improvement? It's a really good question. But yeah, it's a bit sidetracked if we go there now. Cool. So let's come back to it. Okay, for everyone else, please think a little bit. What are the aspects you would like to work with? And I will throw in a few more aspects just to make it a little bit more tangible. Because when I say, let's work at self-compassion, it's a little bit unclear what does that mean. And we will dive deep into practical side of it. But I also wanted to translate it right here a little bit to the side of what does that mean? How can we work on that? How can we become more of our own best friend? So first of all, it is about how we relate to ourselves. We mentioned that already. But it is about that in two aspects especially. And that's how we think about ourselves. Actually, three aspects: think, talk, and behave. So it's really about this thinking, how I see myself, how I think about self, so how I perceive myself in a way, but then also how do I talk about myself and how do I behave about myself. And these three will usually be connected, but sometimes we will be worse at some of them than at the others. So that's something that could be interesting for you to also explore, which of these elements are easier or harder for me. Then we also have this idea, how much do we value ourselves? Like, do we see ourselves as deserving? So kind of beliefs about ourselves. Do we see ourselves as deserving enough? Do we consider ourselves enough in some way or good enough? But also, do we hold ourselves accountable? Or are we, this can go in two very different directions. It can go in the direction that we become too harsh to ourselves, chasing ourselves too hard. But it can also become that we are striving for too little because we think we're not that good and that useful, so it doesn't really matter. So this is interesting, kind of like two sides of the same thing in a way. So it's also related to setting standards for ourselves. So to somehow say, okay, I'm good enough to do this, and I want to do this, and my goals should be big goals, and I should have a self-improvement plan, and I do want to grow and learn and become better, and so on. So I have some standards, I have some goals, I have some things I'm striving for. But at the same time, when I make a mistake on that path, I'm gentle to myself. So we're not saying self-compassion or self-love or being our best friend is like, oh yeah, everything is okay, just sit in the corner, do nothing, enjoy life. It's also about being active in it, but also in a gentle way. And to conclude that, we can say that in a way, it's a mix of these two, having a healthy discipline and at the same time being gentle towards ourselves. So thank you for those sharing in chat on developing self-love, not being so critical, and self-acceptance is forgiveness as a nice topic. I think they're also important, and it totally makes sense you mentioned these. And I think, I wish we could go in all of them much deeper today. Yeah. But unfortunately, we're not going to go very far with that. Cool. So if there are any questions or comments on the first part, you're very welcome to share them in chat, and I will diverge a little bit towards a bit more specific topic, which is self-compassion. So what I shared with you until now, all these big topics like self-compassion, self-love, self-acceptance, that's really about the big topics that you can, or you could say characteristics that you could dig into exploring and training for and developing in yourself and strengthening. All of them are important. Yet today we're going to focus primarily on self-compassion for two reasons. One is because we did need to choose something to actually get practical about it, because we don't have, in 1 hour, there is no chance to dive a lot into all of these topics, and I did want us to come to something very tangible and practical. But at the same time, the reason why self-compassion was chosen as the subtopic is really because it is so related to happiness. Like from all of the things I mentioned, from self-acceptance, self-love, they all relate to happiness, but self-compassion is really in the core of it. It is like the first, most important, most impactful thing to strengthen and to work with when we work on that relationships with ourselves. And we'll talk in a little bit about why, related also to what is self-compassion. So what is self-compassion? If anybody has a good definition, you're very welcome to throw it in the chat. I will share a couple of points of view of what it is. They're all coming from Kristen Neff. You see her name also on the slide if you want to Google it later. She has a TED talk on the topic. She has a really nice books on the topic and so on. So if you want to explore the topic of not all of the topics we mentioned, but just self-compassion specifically, she would be the great name to look for. I can share the name also in the email after, and in the, maybe I put it in one of the final slides. So that's your reference for, in a way. So what is self-compassion really? Self-compassion is really, it's not about ourselves judging and seeing ourselves positively, as self-love would be, in a way. It is more about relating to ourselves kindly. So it's much softer in that way to work with self-compassion than, for example, self-love or anything else. And then it's also really just about this embracing ourselves as we are. So realizing our flaws and accepting them. In some way, being gentle, not being judgmental. And it doesn't mean we need to see ourselves in positive light. It doesn't mean we need to recognize we are amazing. It's not about this boost in self-esteem, or not even in the way of seeing ourselves very positively. It's really just about being kind and being genuinely friendly towards ourselves. In that sense, it has a couple of things that relate to it. And you could really think about it as, how would you relate to your best friend or to your dear friend? Maybe not one and the best one, but to your dear friend. And how would you relate to yourself if you would take the same attitude? And that starts from, I deserve and I'm enough, from kind of picking up that belief a little bit more. That's one that for many, many people, it's quite hard actually, which is a little bit illogical, but at the same time, very, it makes a lot of sense, taking into account the setting in which we live. But so it's really related to this treating ourselves as your own best friend. And that means treating yourself with encouragement. So like pat on the shoulder and saying you can do it, and kind of looking in that, just encouraging ourselves versus scaring ourselves before anything new we do, saying, oh, you can't do it, you will never be able, you're not good at this or anything else. But then it's also about understanding ourselves, allowing space to listen to what are we afraid of, what is bothering us, what do we need in some situation, what do we desire. So building more understanding for ourselves in a way. But then it's also empathy, just being empathetic and compassionate towards ourselves. And then it's also about patience, giving us more time, because usually when we want to change something, when we want to grow in some aspect, when we want to learn something or achieve a goal, one of the worst things we do is we chase ourselves to do it too fast and too quick and too, sometimes impossibly quick. And then patience with ourselves is one skill that is really wonderful to develop to strengthen this. And then it's also just this gentleness. And you could think about this also in terms of how are you relating to yourself, and again, in thinking, in talking, and in behavior, comparing to how are you relating to a kid. Something you say to yourself, would you ever say something like that to a child or something? Or whatever, or dear friend again. So that gentleness is really, really important. So according to Kristen Neff, the lady whose TED talk I just mentioned, She drilled down as a researcher really broad and deep into the topic of self-compassion and developed a lot of ideas related to it. And she said there are 3 elements that are really in the core of self-compassion, 3 elements we need to develop for self-compassion to be stronger. And it's kind of interesting because we are usually very aware of the first one, which is treating ourselves with kindness. So just being a little bit more kind towards ourselves. The other one is kind of obvious, but then the other 2 relate to common humanity, meaning she says recognizing we are all in it together and we're all having a bit similar experience, and something that's hard for me would also be hard for someone else, and something that's challenging me, or maybe this fact I'm not that compassionate towards myself, that's something that's common for ourselves. And it's part of human experience that there are some moments of suffering, some moments that are challenging for us, some moments that we are not sure how to approach them, some moments of insecurity, moments of negative emotion, fear, whatever. So she says recognizing this thing that other people are experiencing the same really helps us to develop more self-compassion. And then the 3rd aspect is mindfulness. And mindfulness is really about realizing the shades of the experience which we're experiencing. So basically noticing what's happening, where, first of all, noticing where is our self-compassion right now. So how is my self-talk? Realizing what's happening in my body and in my mind and in my conversation with myself, and how do I behave, and just being mindful about all of that. But also being mindful about things around me, noticing if something is hard, why is it hard? And just kind of have this ability to observe a little bit better. So we're not going to be drilling much deeper into any of these. I wanted to also throw them in here as kind of 3 different aspects. And if you notice that some of them is surprising for you and it doesn't totally fit here, that's a really good one to reflect on a little bit further. So she says having these 3 things build up and playing together, that makes us able to be kind for ourselves. But self-compassion, it's not just about being kind to ourselves. It's also about acknowledging that something is difficult and that we need to put an effort, and it's not easy for us, and that in some way we are suffering maybe, and that situation is maybe challenging. So also this acknowledgement and recognition that something is difficult is a big part of being able to relate to ourselves a little bit more self-compassionately. Well, having all that said, thanks for the comments shared on the patients being difficult and so on. I'm seeing them. I just don't want to interrupt always to go into the comments. And please do keep on sharing thoughts and comments, because it's also valuable for other people to see what, like, common humanity part, you know, what are other people struggling with, or what are their misunderstandings. So let's go a little bit into how can we practice this. So how can we, you know, actually strengthen the self-compassion? What are the different areas, different ways of working on this? Because in a way, self-compassion is really not one thing. And same for being our best friend. It's this mix of many, many, many things that are happening in us and with us. And working on any of these things will help you build up self-compassion. So self-compassion, it's not about working on self-compassion, all of it together. It's you could approach it that as well, but it's really more about working on these different elements and strengthening each of them, and then kind of building it up as a capacity in that way. So I'm going to go through, I think 6, 7 of them. I will invite you to think a little bit as I'm sharing them, which of them is the most challenging one for you, and which of them would be most valuable if you could strengthen it, if you could make it like in some way. And then when I will share some exercises in the end, but they won't match all of these things because that would be too long list. But if you realize there is some element here you feel like you should be strengthening it and you don't know how, please don't hesitate to send me an email, and I'll share maybe some idea or exercise or resource to go dig into that subtopic. Because I think for all of us it's different what we need within this topic. So please feel free to individualize everything I'm saying and look for your own exercise or solution. So first of all, self-compassion is hugely impacted by our self-talk. And we had a little bit of that mentioned in the chat previously on the side of criticizing ourselves and being very judgmental. And if you're not sure where to start to work on, what to start to work on in terms of self-compassion, I would say self-talk is a great place to start. And that's just about noticing more about how am I talking to myself, in which situations, what kind of words do I use, what kind of tone do I use, and then relating it to that same thing. Would I talk to a friend like that? If not, how would I talk? What would be different about the way I would talk to a friend comparing to how I talk to myself? There is really nice exercise for this. I wanted to share it in the end, but I can actually share it. I think I can share it now as well. And that exercise, it's called mirror meditation. And it basically goes in a way that you take 1 minute or 2 minutes to look at yourself in the mirror and just notice what you're thinking. So notice good things, notice bad things, and maybe ask a couple of whys. So literally giving yourself eye contact and kind of going, whatever. If the first thought is, oh my God, I look so tired today, then the next question could be, why, like, where did that thought come from? Or kind of like, just noticing, developing mindfulness on our self-talk. That's a really nice exercise to kind of start off with. And it takes literally 1 or 2 minutes. So it's an interesting one. And then with time, it goes towards reframing that same self-talk and just kind of questioning it more. But the initial start, it's just connecting and listening in a way. Then the second step is anything that relates to developing mindfulness. We had webinar on that topic as well. There is a ton of things, as that was January topic, ton of things on Facebook page, on blog from my Happiness Academy. So we're not going to be talking about this one much, but this is really crucial aspect as well. Mindfulness in terms of observing, understanding, noticing what's happening in us and around us. Without that, it's very hard to change anything or to understand the impact of anything if first we don't have that side. Then a very, very important element of connecting with ourselves, being our best friend, is listening. And this is one we're gonna touch on today in practical exercise, let's say. This is really about listening to ourselves, meaning listening to how do we feel, listening to what do we need, what do we want, just asking those questions, just connecting with ourselves in different ways. It can be very different ways, by the way, from journaling to talking to ourselves, to mirror exercise I just shared, to just stopping for a second, taking a breath and asking, what do I need right now? I would say this is also one of the great first steps towards more self-compassion, starting by noticing what is it that we are missing or what is causing us some sort of whatever pain or discomfort. So listening to ourselves. Then it's also understanding ourselves. It's hard to understand our emotions in the moment or our needs or our wishes if we don't know ourselves well in terms of our beliefs, our values, our purpose, our characteristics, including strengths, but can be also weaknesses. So anything that you do that's related to gaining more clarity on your authentic individual characteristics and beliefs and kind of big picture wants and wishes is also very related to self-compassion. Because you cannot really make a good call on momentarily things like what do I need, wish, and so on, and why are they good or bad, or how do they serve you or not, if you don't have this higher level of understanding. And then we have two more. One is connecting. One of the incredible ways of understanding more about how we connect with ourselves is through observing how we connect with others. So noticing how different people makes us feel, what kind of thoughts we pick up from them, what kind of energy and emotion we pick up from them, but also what kind of patterns we are playing out in communication. That's something that's going to really help us understand also our side of things, and to understand ourselves, to listen to ourselves. It will basically strengthen the first two. So a lot of things about yourself you can realize by being annoyed by it in other people or liking it in other people. So that's probably one of the most powerful mirrors to explore more about the topic. And then the last one is really about the behavior, but not behavior, what am I pushing myself to do because I think I should do it, but the opposite, noticing our behaviors, noticing when am I sabotaging myself, when am I in some way being overly harsh or overly spoiling myself, what is that level between, in which aspects specifically, like from food to work to relationships, where am I too harsh? Where am I too mild? Like if I had a child, which of these approaches would I take with that kid? Would I want to spoil him to that level, or would I want to be so harsh in that specific aspect? And this is very interesting to explore, because many of us have tendency to be overly harsh and disciplined in one area, but then compensate for that by spoiling and taking it too easy in another area of our life. So this is very interesting to explore. Even if you think you're very disciplined or very too soft on yourself, this is very interesting to explore across different activities and aspects and kind of reflect on it a little bit. Cool. So we're gonna go from here to touch a little bit on self-care as one of the practical ways of practicing self-compassion and connecting with yourself in practice. And then we're going to do two small exercises. But while we go there, I would invite you here again to share, maybe in chat if you feel like it, which of these things are some of the topics that for you are like interesting to explore further. Which of these would you like to strengthen and do better and be better at? And I can start by sharing that for me, listening to myself, that's one where I would want to be better. I do it well when I'm an easygoing schedule, but when I'm in rush of an action, then I really sometimes disconnect a bit. So for me, that's one, for example, a really interesting thing to explore further. But I would really like for each of you to find maybe one or two that make sense for you, because this is kind of like, if you're going to the gym for the first time, you first want to figure out which of the muscles are the weakest and you want to strengthen them most. This is exactly that. Thinking which of these muscles for you are the weakest and would benefit of strengthening. And again, if you have any questions, you're also very welcome to share that in chat, or we have one on hold, but cool. So I wanted to propose self-care, although I already said for a lot of things that are a great place to start, like listening to yourself or self-talk, that's great places to start. But self-care is also a really nice place to start working on self-compassion, partially because you can make it, first of all, because it can be quite related to behavior, which is something easier to control than the thoughts. But also because you can relate it to a positive motivation of sort of a pleasure or joy in things. So in that sense, it's a really good place to start connecting with yourself in a way. So self-care, one thing that's important for self-care that I wanted to underline, I kind of mentioned it before, but I wanted to underline, is really how are we doing things in thoughts and attitudes and the way we relate to ourselves and think ourselves versus our behaviors. Some of us tend to do one of these two things much better than the other. So being good, taking good care of ourselves in behavior, I don't know, being healthy, exercises, eating healthy, taking care of ourselves, or being cozy, whatever it is. But in some way, taking care of ourselves physically and in behavior, in actions, but neglecting a bit the part of working on thinking process. And that's in self-care topic most related to that part of listening, or what do we need, and what is actually good for us. Should we be strict on ourselves today, or should we be gentle? What's the right approach in a way? And the way to start digging into this is really to start with these two questions. First one is, what does self-care mean for me? And the second one is, how am I doing it well, whatever it is that it means for you, and where could I improve? I would just invite you to approach this improvement in a very gentle way, not to be like, oh, must fix this, but to really be gentle about it and kind of like exploring it more. So you could apply the same thing to any of the other topics you're mentioning, but I would invite you to start with self-care because it's kind of quite easygoing comparing to other things. So what does it mean to you? Does it mean to take care of your body? Does it mean to take care of your thoughts? Does it mean to allow you more space? Does it mean to say no to some things? Yeah, okay, so we have a question from Niels, which is a really good question, and it's kind of it's almost related to Jasmine's question from before, but it's much shorter to answer, so I'm going to answer it now. So the question is, what does it mean to approach the improvement in a gentle way? So primarily it's related to two things. One is to self-talk, and one is how we deal when we don't do it perfectly or when we make mistakes, which is, again, goes back to self-talk very often. And that's really just about, while we are on the road of improvement, we always imagine that we're going to do something in a very linear way. You're going to do these 5 steps, and then you'll be great at this, and that never goes like that. There are always sort of a little diversions on that way, or little tripping stones, or some ways of, losing the track on that. And then the part that's there, which is most important to approach it gently, is this part about where there is a setback on our road of improvement, and when we need more motivation to do something, to do that in a way, again, to talk to yourself like you would talk to a kid or to a puppy or to a dear friend. So not shout at yourself and go like, damn it, you need to do it better, and I'm always bad at this, and I'm terrible, and I'm not doing it well enough, and I need to improve faster, or not applying that kind of pressure, but instead going more down the line. Okay, this is something we are doing it. How can I do it better? That's a really good question. How can I do it better? Because that's not a question where you need to be harsh towards yourself. So it can be really, how can I do this better? Okay, what am I learning out of this? What can I take away? So anything down that line. I won't go further with it, but that's the kind of in a nutshell. Cool, I'm seeing answers to the previous one, of which what it was most difficult under this umbrella, and we had very diverse answers, like better balance between hard discipline and spoiling. That's difficult. Connecting and self-talk. And self-talk, I think it's big. Self-talk is probably the most impactful area you can work on, but it's also one of the hardest ones. So it's up to you if you want to start with the little muscles and strengthen those first, or you want to tackle the big one, but that's also quite impactful one. Cool. So I would propose we do 2 exercises. They're both very short. And then I'm going to just share a long list of other exercises you could be doing and some references. And then that's it, more or less. And then we can go also to questions and tackle the Jasmine's question and any other questions. So if you have any distractions around you now, like phones, other tabs, whatever, food even, it's time to get rid of them just for like 7-8 minutes until you do these 2 exercises. And it's time to take a very deep breath before we start. That includes me speaking without breathing. So yeah, just take one more deep breath. And we're going to just slow down a little bit now. So the first exercise we're going to do, and keep on breathing deep, please, while I explain, is really related to this part of listening to ourselves. Also to connecting to ourselves gently, but primarily to listening to ourselves. And it's called listening to your heart. And it's very simple. We're going to do it in the simplest form now, but then you can vary it a lot as well. And that simple form will be to take a couple of deep breaths. I'll still guide you and tell you that. And then to put a hand on your heart and you can try to find the heartbeat if you can, but if you cannot, it doesn't matter. Just feel your lungs like, spreading and moving and connecting that way between your arm and the rhythm of your heart. Yeah. So we'll do that for maybe 3 breaths. I'll just do a and then I will explain it now, and then I'll give you 2 minutes to do it without me talking. You just take maybe 2 or 3 more very deep, slow breaths, preferably in your nose. You can breathe out on your mouth if you prefer. And then you're gonna try to connect with your heart in any way that works for you. It can be more mushy, like really, hey, where is my heart? Or it can be just connecting with yourself and saying, hey, you, maybe your name, hey, Mirna, what's up? And you're gonna ask a question, how are you today? And what do I need today? Yeah, so we'll just do that. You can close your eyes, you don't have to. Take 3 deep breaths. In the end of the 3 deep breaths, ask, hey, how are you today? Wait a little bit for the answer. And then ask, hey, what do you need today? So how are you? What do you need? But first, couple of deep breaths. I'm going to do it for the sake of timing as well. And then I'll continue talking in like 2 minutes or so. I'm going to move on. It's super hard to guess your timing. I know many people would want more time on this, but it's super hard to read it when none of you is here. No, so I will comment on it a little bit, but it's also something that I would really invite you to explore more on your own. Although I wanted us to just tap into it on this call. So first I'm going to ask you who actually did it to tell us in chat, because I'm very curious how many people actually tried it and how many are slacking because of the webinar call. And if you did it, you're very welcome to share also, was it interesting and why and what did you like or not, in chat primarily. And I will give you just a short explanation. What was the point of the exercise? What's the idea? What's the idea behind it? And how maybe you can take it away. So this exercise is from a book called Soulful Simplicity by, what's her name? Courtney Carver. She's one of the minimalists that's kind of writing a lot of books on minimalism and so on, but in a very gentle, very nice way. And this is for her one exercise that made a huge difference for her, and I kind of took it and tweaked it a bit. The idea of this exercise is really to just tune into listening to yourself more by building a small, light habit of taking that little chunk of time. Slowing down was good for me. Thanks for sharing that. For me too. But the idea here is really just to develop a habit of taking that moment to check in. You can do that in many different ways. You can do it with mini meditation, with just breathing, with checking your feelings. I just found this quite nice way of doing it. But I would invite you to tweak it a little bit. The key of this exercise, if you want to do more of it, is to allow time for answers to rise, which we didn't totally do today. It's still valuable if you don't, but it's better if you allow a little bit more time. Yes, I'll write reference. I think I didn't reference it here, but I can write you all of it in the email after, because I'll send you a recording anyway. Not to write it now. Also, I'll mention a few more books, so I can write you all of that. Okay, so the key is taking those few breaths to slow down, but then also when you ask a question, even if the question can literally be just what's up? Hey heart, what's up today? Or hey Mirna, what's up today? But just allowing a bit of time for answer to rise. And it's quite normal and common that first few time you do it, you don't get a lot of answers. But as the time goes, if you're doing it a little bit, not even every day, although every day is great, but just a bit more regularly, you start to get more and more answers. So this is a really nice way to very quickly listen to yourself. And to do that sort of check-in, maybe even in a situation when you are in some way confused about something, it's good exercise even for a public place. You don't have to necessarily do the heart, hand on heart and so on. So I'm not gonna babble more about it. You get the point, although I could. There are many variations we could play with, but I would invite you to test it a little bit more for yourself. And yeah, just try it out. So we'll do one more exercise. It will take around 4 or 5 minutes, which means in total we will be 3 or 4 minutes late with the end of the call. But yeah, if that happens, sorry for that. If you want to jump off, you can do that as well, because you'll get the recording. But for this exercise, I would invite you for the same thing, to leave anything, any distractions. I hope you did that already, and to just focus on the exercise. And you can also start with a couple of deep breaths. I'll just do one for a start, but please, you keep on doing them. And how you can, if it's easier for you, you can close your eyes, but you don't have to. If you don't close them, please don't look too much, but just stare at the empty spot, at the wall or floor or something like that. And in this exercise, and please keep on breathing deep, we're going to start with just grounding a little bit, in a way that we're going to put our feet on the floor. And we're going to imagine, if they're not, please get them there now. And imagine that from your feet, there are these long virtual roots growing and connecting you to the earth. Make it a pleasant experience, not like some ties, but very, very gentle. Just kind of with intention of grounding a little bit, of feeling a little bit more grounded, a little bit more connected to the earth. So just imagine any kind of roots you like. They can be very deep or not so deep, and just let the roots grow out of your feet. And then we're going to do also the opposite, meaning try to connect from your mind as well, just towards the openness and vastness. That was very bad, vastness, but you get what I mean, the huge space of the universe above us. So you can imagine that in many different ways. You can imagine it as light coming out of your head, or light coming down to your head, or just this openness. But basically what we want to create here is this feeling of openness and connection towards the universe, towards everything and everyone around us. And when you do that, just take 2 more deep breaths, and then I'll give you one more task. And our third task, we will start doing something every time we breathe in and breathe out. Still being connected to the ground, being connected to and open to the universe. What we will do is, every time we breathe in, you will say to yourself, I love you. And you can use your name, or you can just say sentence, I love you. You can say it in English, you can say it in your language, whatever you want. But every time you breathe in, you will say, I love you. And whatever answer comes up, you will breathe it out and let it go with your breath. And we will do that for 7, 8 breaths. Hopefully I can hold the silence for that long. So we'll just keep on doing that. Keep the roots and the universe in mind, but don't overthink them. And just with every breath, think, I love you, and then just let go the answer. So we'll do it for 7 breaths, and then we'll continue. Okay, cool. I'm gonna continue. Don't worry if you didn't do 7, it doesn't really matter. It's a bit of arbitrary number anyway. The idea is normally you do this exercise for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want. I would love to hear your thoughts in the chat of how did you like it? Was it annoying and stressful? Was it wonderful and relaxing? Was it confusing? This one is really, well, first one was much more connected to listening to yourself. This one is much more connecting to actually changing the pattern of how you're relating to yourself without listening. So in this one, you don't want to overthink the answer. You don't even want to hear the answer. You don't want to like notice what all the wrong the things are going wrong or whatever. You really just want to go directly to the point of like sending that message to yourself, sending your message, sending that message, and practicing letting go with your breath. Anything that maybe rises. And even if it's good things rising, that's fine. It's good to let go good things as well. So yeah, that's another one that I would really recommend if you want to more cultivate that feeling, especially feeling of self-love, but anything, self-compassion and so on, then this is a really nice exercise. Cool. Happy to hear some of you like it. And let's now I will throw at you a few more exercises and then we're gonna go close it off. So sorry, almost on top of the hour. These exercises I just wanted to share as an ideas of different practical things you can do. It's not a huge list. I could write much longer one. It was very hard to choose, but it is some list just for you to have practical tools and idea. So what we just did, it's called self-love meditation, or at least I don't know if it has official name. That's how I call it. It's from a really cool book by Kamal Ravikant, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. The ones who are in Tribe, in Positive Psychology Tribe, in Facebook group, you already saw it there, the book, several times. So I'll also send you the name of the book if you want to check it out. But it's enough to do, you don't have to read the book, you can just start doing it and playing with it. The other one we did, the listening to your heart, is also something you could be doing and exploring more. You can change the questions, like don't change it within the exercise, but in advance, think about what do I want to ask my heart or myself today. Maybe one day I want to ask, what does my body need? Maybe one day I want to ask, how do I feel about some decision? Maybe one day I want to ask, what do I need, like whole of me or whatever. So you can design those questions in advance. What matters is just to keep connecting and allowing that space. There is also that mirror meditation that I told you, that's about facing yourself in the mirror and then noticing what kind of thoughts arise and then just observing them. And like maybe with time also starting to change them. But first few times the idea is really to just observe them. And a variation of this exercise is also to find a photo of yourself that you like. There's like one photo that you actually really like. And then noticing what do you like about it. So just reflecting on it, what do you like? That's a bit more, sort of more positive. Mirror meditation is more about noticing and allowing whatever it is. And the photo one is more about cultivating the positive in a way. Then there is a ton of exercises on Kristen Neff website, which is self-compassion.org. I'll send you also in the email. Some examples are writing the self-compassionate letter to yourself or different kinds of meditation with a bit of self-compassion tweak. So maybe you want to check it out. It's quite a long list there and it's a lot of different practical stuff. By the way, if you find an exercise you think it's amazing, I would love to hear it. Because for me it's very hard to assess which one to recommend because there are so many. So if you have really good experience with some, I would be very happy to get that feedback to know what to recommend to other people as well. And then there is a meditation called Metta Loving Kindness. I know for a fact some of you know it, no, but if you don't know it, maybe check it out as well. It's basically about generating feelings of compassion, starting with yourself, but then also towards other people and towards the whole world. It's a really nice meditation. However, it exists in many variations. So if you don't like the first one you try, maybe try out a few more different ones. Just Google it, you'll find a ton of things. And find one that, explore it a bit. If you don't like it at first, don't judge it on the first look. That, by the way, that meditation is also very related to generating more positive emotions in life in general. So it's recommended on many other levels and on connecting with others better. So it's really one of the great exercises to do more of. We are also doing a workshop with Happiness Academy, the online one, in 23rd of May, I'll tell you in a bit also about the next workshops and so on. So that's also one way of checking it out. It will be much more interactive than this. It's like 3 hours and with much more sharing and exercises. But I think without it, you also have a lot of materials now to work on. So if you feel you need accountability and more like diving into the process and understanding it better, then by all means join the workshop. But if you have clarity of what you should be practicing, then just do it on your own. I think what matters is to be doing something in a way. And the last thing on the topic itself, by the way, I hope this was useful. I know I throw in a lot of very diverse stuff, so feedback is also very welcome. You have my email on ideas of what you found more useful or yet less useful, because it's always so hard to choose which things to squeeze in into an hour. I wanted to leave you with one final kind of idea or a thought, because all of the things we mentioned, they might seem a little bit complicated, you know, all these elements of self-compassion, all these exercises to do, ways to train and practice and then change this and change that. I wanted to share also with you one little trick or hack or shortcut, which we kind of mentioned already, but it's really takeaway message in a way. If you want to do more of self-compassion, yet you don't know where to start, or you don't have whatever discipline, accountability, mood, motivation to practice some of the practical exercises, just do more of this. It will already be really big impact. And that is literally whenever you're doing something for yourself, being it in thinking, talking, or behavior, so self-talk or thoughts about yourself or doing something to yourself or behaving in some way, just as often as you can, try to remember, hey, how would I talk to my friend about this? How would I behave towards my friend about this? How would I feed my friend if I want him well? How would I how do I think about my friend? And choose a dear friend, right? One that towards whom you're very gentle, preferably. But that's really like the easiest shortcut you can use. And if you just give it a bit of consistency, it really, really helps. You can replace best friend with a puppy or a child if that's more of your domain. We usually go with the dear friend. Cool. So I hope that today, with all of things thrown at you, and you will get the recording as well if you need to go back to refer to something, I hope we managed to plant some seeds and some new ideas and some ideas that you want to grow. However, as always, the seeds will not grow themselves. So if you want to grow them, start doing something about it. Feel free to use Tribe as a playground to share more with each other and to share more ideas and exercises and experiences with it, or ask for accountability or body. That's really good place for that. And by all means, please keep on exercising and practicing. I want to leave you with one conclusion and then a couple of references actually I think I forgot to add the book, but I'll send you in the email. So I want to leave you with one conclusion about 3 steps you can start applying if you want to build up more self-compassion. And this is, first of all, just start by noticing more, by understanding more, by asking more, whatever it is that you want to change, being it that you want to change self-compassion in total, or that you want to change just the self-talk. Start with noticing more, with understanding more, with just figuring it out. You know, that's a really important step, because by being more aware, you also slow down a bit, and that over longer term creates space to also change those reactions. So just observing it is already like halfway there in a way. The second thing is, remember to work on all of these aspects, in a sense, on thinking, on talking, and on behavior, not just on one of them. Although one usually pulls in the other and helps the other, but still, I would encourage you to think from both aspects. And when you're trying to change something, to change the thinking, but also do some actions and, build environment and maybe accountability with someone to also change something in behavior, not just in thinking. And then the third thing, how you could approach it, is just by exploring different exercises, and while exploring them, being gentle. No, don't forget that part, without forcing. Yeah, and then really just figuring out what works for you. So with sort of curiosity, start from some that appeals to you most, see how you like it. And yeah, I would definitely invite not to do everything, but to approach it with the mind of explorer and find what works well and what works the best. I will ask you, from all of the things we were mentioning today, to share in chat one action that you wish to take away. So one, it can be take away one conclusion you get or one action you would like to do. I would really love you to write that, because that makes it a little bit more committing for you. In the meantime, I'm going to close it off with a couple of references and quick invitation. And then after that, I'll stay for question and answer to answer Jasmine's question and also any other questions, because then everybody who doesn't want to talk about questions can leave in a couple of minutes. But please, before you leave, make sure to write one action or takeaway in the chat as sort of a checkout and bye-bye. So I would want to invite you, if you're not there yet, to join one or both of these places. One is Happiness Academy newsletter, which we send monthly, and we send different materials, different visuals, different invitations, also invitation to other webinars, to other workshops, but then also some of the whatever text, videos, whatever we create. So that's a really good place to hear what did we create next. And I wrote the wrong link here. It's Happiness Academy EU, but I can add it also in the chat. And the other one is really to join also Positive Tribe, our Facebook group, which is community that's really all about inspiring each other and sharing positive things, and also sharing a lot of knowledge from positive psychology, but also just this mutual support. And then last but not least, we are doing in May. This is something that usually I don't share at the end of the workshop, because we usually don't do so many of them. But in May, I'm delivering as much as 5 different online workshops, because in May is my virtual month this year, hiding in a quiet place and doing virtual stuff. So if you're interested in some of these, do reach out. We're doing life design, we're doing mindset and thinking patterns, flow, strengths, and becoming own best friend. All of them are quite a deeper dive, quite a more experiential, very small group. And really like exploring and experiential learning in a way. And I'm really looking forward to all of them. So if you want to build up some of these, do shout. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to check out what are you taking away. So we had self-compassion is the basement for self-love. Base. Fair enough. After all mispronunciation I've done, that's totally fair. Is the base for self-love. Be more compassionate, explore more listening to heart, cool. Observe different part of self-compassion into journal for the next 66 days. Wow, that's a big commitment. More imagine your rooted meditation. Okay, I call it self-love meditation or Kamal meditation, because that's the author, although it's a bit weird. Yeah, I love that one too, cool. And then, paying attention to the self-talk. Cool, thanks everyone for sharing. I will stop the recording now, and I will share the recording with all of you. And I will stay here for another 5 to 10 minutes to answer the Jasmine's question first, and then any other questions. But you are not, like, at this point, you are done with the content. So if you feel like you